No matter how hard we try to expose our images correctly in the field, it's quite easy to lose detail in the bright highlights or the dark shadows, quickly ruining an otherwise great image. But today I'll show you a simple trick that will allow you to bring all that lost detail back, and it's so easy that anyone can do it. I'm Wegener, and for over 20 years I've been a professional photographer capturing unique bird photos and videos and teaching all of you to create your own masterpieces. Messing up our exposure in the field can happen so quickly. Suddenly the light changes and the images turn out way too bright or too dark. Now some of that we can fix, but oftentimes we're left with areas that are either dark and noisy or blown out. And this is where a good editing workflow comes into play, because that will allow us to bring all that lost detail back and give us fantastic looking final images. Let's start with an image of a western yellow robin. Definitely not my best photo, but it's a great example for us to use today. The light was kind of all over the place when I took it, and even though I tried to balance out the exposure, I ended up blowing out some of the bright feathers on the bird's belly. One of the tools I'll be using today is the clone tool or the clone stamp, and because of that I'll be using Photoshop. You can do something similar in Lightroom, but it's a little bit more clumsy and harder to do. And generally, I would say whenever you want to clone something, do it in Photoshop. It's just much easier to do and much more controlled. So we're now here in Photoshop, and when we zoom into our problem area, we can see that even though in Camera Raw I tried my best to contain the whites, pulling back the highlights, pulling back the exposure, and pulling back the whites, I still lost detail in the bird's belly. And now we need to fix that. And the best way to do that is actually with a clone stamp at about 50% opacity. And I'll show you one more trick, because normally we're using a round clone tool, but in this case that's not very good for us. We're going to use a different clone tool with a different clone tool head that looks a lot more like the little feather strands, allowing it to easily clone over some of these problematic areas. So for that we're going to press S on our keyboard to bring up the clone tool. We go to about 50% opacity. We make sure that we have 0% hardness selected, and then on the right hand side where we have our brush settings, we scroll down to somewhere where it says number 16, and then at the bottom from number 16 we also make sure that the spacing is set to 1%. And now you can see that we have a clone tool that's not round anymore, but just a few little dots here and there that will brush basically just little lines whenever we click. And now with the clone tool, I'm sure you're familiar with it, but all we need to do is press the optional Alt key to sample feathers from a certain area and then brush them into the other area where we need them. And because we're brushing at 50% opacity, we're kind of blending the two bright areas with some of the darker areas in the end, giving us a nice overall blend that looks quite realistic. If we're cloning at 100%, it would just be impossible to do and the whole bird would look quite strange. And before we start cloning, it's important to create a new layer, so we can brush on a new layer, and if there's changes that are too much, for instance, we can simply lower the opacity or add a layer mask to that layer and then reverse some of the work that we've done. So the easiest way to do that is just to make a copy of our background layer, and then we can start cloning. And when we start cloning, we want to make sure that we sample from different areas on the bird to avoid repeating patterns. So the idea is that we sample a darker side and then blend that in with the brighter feathers. And because we're brushing at sort of 50% opacity, it should all blend nicely together. And just like that, we removed all the unpleasant too bright feathers. And because we sampled from all different areas and merged it together at different opacities, the final result actually looks quite realistic. And if we click that on and off, we can see that the area is still bright, but we don't have that unwanted blown out area anymore. And if you feel like you've done too much, for instance, you can also go over here on the right hand side to your layer and just lower the opacity slightly, bringing it back to the point where it blends in very well with the rest of the bird. There's one more tool that I like to use when I'm dealing with too bright or too dark areas, and that is DXO's Nik Collection Color Effects, and in there the Detail Extractor. And I'll show you now how to use it. I never run that on the whole image, so I'll make a new layer, run the detail extractor, then hide the whole layer, and then just brush it into the few areas that need to be affected by it. So for that, I'm blending these two layers together now. I'll press Shift, Option, Command, and E to do that, and that merges the layer together for you. So we go to Filter, Nik Collection 8, Color Effects. That will open our image in Nik now, and down here I already made a favorite, the Detail Extractor. And you can see that makes our image look kind of a little bit strange now, but it helps us to get more detail into those bright areas. So now you can see the Nik Collection is applied on its own layer, so I can click that on and off, and it definitely doesn't do something good to our background, so we would never want to apply to the whole image. So now we want to hide it. So we click on that layer and go down to Layer Mask, hold down the Option key, and that creates a black layer mask hiding everything we've done. And now what we need to do is use a white brush and brush on the black layer mask to just bring back some of the changes. So we hit B for our brush tool, make it a decent size, go to like 20% opacity, 0% hardness, make sure we're on that layer and make sure that the color is white. And now we can simply brush in some of these changes on some of the areas that are still too bright. If we go from the before to the after, you can see that we definitely improved our image dramatically and took one of those too bright, unfortunate looking areas completely away. So you don't necessarily need the Nik collection, but I find it to be quite a good helper, especially in situations like this. And the 1-2 punch of the clone tool and the Nik collection allows us to blend in way too bright areas and make them look really nice and well balanced overall. And if you want to learn more tricks that make all the difference and get an easy to follow workflow that you can apply to all your RAW files, check out my Lightroom and Next Generation Photoshop Masterclasses down there in the description. In my Masterclasses, I teach you my workflows step by step and equip you with the tools and techniques needed to turn even your toughest to edit RAW files into beautiful, vibrant, professional quality images that you will love. But of course, you won't just be watching, because I'm also providing you with my own RAW files so you can edit right alongside me. And if you're not sure if my classes are worth it or the right fit for you, check out some of the amazing reviews that I receive on a daily basis from many happy students who I've helped to transform their editing lives, who now get great results every single time and love the editing process. So if you want to master image editing and get amazing results from all your RAW files every single time, check out my classes down below. Next, we have an image of a rainbow pitter. These birds like to hang out in sort of dark, shadowy forests. And one big problem with them is that they're so black and dark on their chest. And usually you have to shoot them at very high ISO levels. This was taken, I think, at 12,800 ISO. And then you easily lose some detail on the bird's black belly. But we know now how to actually fix that, and I want to show you. We're basically using a similar trick, just in a slightly different variation. So the first step is again to create a new layer so we can clone on a separate layer so we can undo our changes if we need to. And now if we zoom into the bird's belly here, we can see that right at the bottom, there's a lot of detail missing. And now because we will be cloning close to the edge of the bird, it probably makes sense to make a mask of the bird as well. So we quickly just go to the object selection tool, select our bird, and then we press S for our clone stamp. But this time around, I actually don't want to use the sort of feathered clone tool. I just want to use the normal round clone tool. So I go to our brush settings on the top right again, go to number 30, spacing is fine. We go to 50% opacity, that's good, 0% hardness, and we just make it a bit bigger, zoom out slightly. And what I want to do now is just clone from some of these higher areas up here, just down to these darker areas that have no detail. And if we click that on and off now, we can see that in that area that had no detail before, we just added a little bit of detail. Now in this image, this isn't a super dramatic change, but if you're dealing with certain black birds, you will notice that they have these areas where it's almost impossible to get detail into, and then this is a fantastic trick. You could also run the Nik collection on this bird, but you would have to be very careful because the detail extractor with a black bird will pull out all the contrast. You would only have to use it at a very low opacity and blend it back in, because otherwise the bird will start looking a little bit too gray. And the last image I want to show you doesn't actually have one area that's blown out or has no details in the shadows, but it does have an unpleasant shadow on that big gull on the right hand side. And this happens when you take images in relatively harsh light. This was around like 10 o'clock in the morning. Now the light isn't horrible, but because the bird has a big shadow on it, it signals to our brain that we're basically dealing with quite harsh light here. And if we lessen or remove this shadow, it will just make it a more pleasant to look at overall image, and will also make it feel like the light wasn't as harsh. So now let me show you how to do that. So first of all, we create a new layer of our background so we can undo the changes if we have to. Never clone on the background layer, because then you can basically never go back on anything that you've done. If you're using a new layer, you can basically just delete the layer if you messed up anything and start again. In the next, we obviously need a selection of our bird. In this case, the object selection tool should do a good enough job. But if you want to learn more about really intricate selections, you can also check out my masterclass where I teach you exactly how to make selections that basically allow you to make big changes without leaving a trace. So now with the bird selected, we want to bring up our clone tool. So we press S, And then we want to be at around, probably here in this case, 40% opacity, 0% hardness, and the round clone tool is fine. And then, just like before, we want to sample from a brighter area in this case and clone that over the darker area. So just sample from certain areas and just brush that in. We don't want to remove all of the shadow, but we just want to make it much brighter. And you can see because we've selected the bird only, we cannot accidentally brush onto our background. And if we click that on and off now, you can see that we didn't remove the whole shadow on the bird, but at the same time lessen the impact of that kind of dark and yellow shadow that doesn't look very nice and made the bird look very nice and bright and white. And this is one technique that I like a lot more, for instance, than dodging and burning, because if you dodge and burn, you usually leave either dark edge or bright edge where the dark area and the bright area kind of intersect, whereas with this method, we can create basically seamless transitions. Because we're cloning from areas that have a lot of detail, we can actually introduce some detail to areas that otherwise would have no detail at all. And that brings us to the end of today's video. I hope that these tricks will help you to get better results from your own RAW files, because these bright areas and very dark areas can definitely be difficult to deal with. And of course, I would love to hear from you guys now in the comments. What are your thoughts about image editing like this? Have you done it before? Are you going to implement it into your workflow? What are your biggest struggles when it comes to image editing? Let me know down there in the comments. Of course, if you want to learn more about image editing, also check out my masterclasses where I teach you everything you need to know step by step and in great detail. And I would also appreciate if you give me a thumbs up for the video, check out my channel membership, and of course, hit that subscribe button so we can grow our community. And I will see you in another video very soon. Bye.